thank you all for being here. Look forward to speaking with you all. We're going to go back over kind of the project, kind of goals, kind of our vision for the city and what we hope to accomplish here. And then kind of get into the kind of details of what we've heard from you and kind of how we got to this point, which is kind of showing you all kind of our first concept designs. And then again, asking for your feedback. And we'll talk through the next steps after that.
All right. So thank you all for coming. Just doing our due diligence here of the Zoom meeting, although this is probably old hat for everybody on the phone. So you've probably heard 12 million times by now in the past couple of years. Press *6 to unmute yourself. If you're on the phone, *9 to raise your hand. Most of you are likely aware of how to use those Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen. Some docs put them at the top or on the sides. Sometimes you need to mouse over your screen to get to those things. But again, you probably already all know about that. Just a reminder, we are going to have an open communication component of this meeting at the end where you guys can raise your hands and unmute and share your thoughts and ask questions. So please be polite to your neighbors. Let's try to get as many folks talking as we can in this meeting. We will be recording this, as you have heard, and we will be posting this video and a transcript on the project website as soon as we get that prepared for you all. You're also welcome to use the chat feature to communicate with us and ask questions as we're giving the presentation, and then we'll try to roll through those and answer those questions. If we don't answer all of your questions, we're going to try to compile those and post something on the website. And we'll talk about this in a bit, but as a reminder, there's an in-person meeting that we will be holding tomorrow night, which will be the same content. So you're welcome to pass that information along to your friends and neighbors who couldn't be here today. All right. So I'm going to also go through our typical contact information and how you find out more. I don't see anyone on the phone, so I am not going to read through this character by character like I normally do. So I'll just read these to you clearly. If you would like to email Matt for more information, his email is dot.community@baltimorecity.gov. And that's Matt Hendrickson's email address. The website for our project is www.baltimorebikeways.com/Wolfe with an E -Washington -Bikeway. There is a direct link to our public input form, and Mike is going to be copying and pasting all of this in the chat to push out to you in just a bit. But the direct link to the input form is www.baltimorebikeways.com/Wolfe-Washington-Bikeway/contact. Nice, short, and truncated for everyone. And if you would like to leave us a voicemail or a phone message, that phone number is 443-984-4095. And again, Mike has pushed that out through the chat, and we'll repeat this again toward the end of our meeting. All right. So a reminder that we'd love to hear from you all today. We want to hear from more folks tomorrow night, but we want to hear from as many people as we can. So share those links, share this with your friends and neighbors. We are going to leave this period of public input open through October 15th. So today and tomorrow, until the 15th, there's going to be a map that you can go to online on your own time and provide comments for us. Or again, use the contact form, but we want to make sure that we have that open for about a month starting today. So use that link in the chat, visit that on your own time, whatever you need to do, but you've got plenty of time to give us some feedback after this meeting. All right, so let's jump into where we have been, where this all started, the foundation of it, and what we've done thus far. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, so this is certainly an evolution of kind of the city's vision for our bike lane network. We've had kind of two iterations that we're working from, kind of the full on bike master plan in 2015, and then an addendum to that highlighted kind of a separated bike lane network. And that kind of separation is really important for us because that means there's a physical barrier between people riding their bikes within a bike facility and then people driving their cars. It just raises the level of comfort for everyone on the roadway, eliminates confusion and conflict so that everyone knows where they should be within the road, and that they feel comfortable and confident riding. And that's really our goal as a city. We want to be able to provide bike infrastructure for everyone of all ages and abilities. And this is kind of like our guiding vision for us to accomplish that. And so this project was identified and highlighted within those plans. And so to be able to execute those plans, we need money. And so we reached out to the state. We have some great partners there who have that same vision, so that people can get around safely from all neighborhoods within Baltimore to get to where they need to go. And so we were funded by the Bikeways program. So a big shout out to MDOT. Thank you guys for your support. The kind of goal within this project was to look at not just the feasibility of bike infrastructure on both or Wolfe and Washington, but also to develop 30% design plans. And so Melissa is going to kind of walk us through where we are within those kind of stages. However, we've kind of gone beyond the feasibility. We've identified some locations, our preferred location on Washington Street for that bike facility, as well as kind of the other needs within this corridor where we really heard that there's a huge need for traffic calming on both of these streets. So we want it to be safe for everyone on the roadway. And we're really kind of have direction from our complete streets guidance and adoption from the city that really provides, guidance for us to make sure that it's safe for our most vulnerable users, like people walking, people biking, and accessing transit. And so that's a huge emphasis for us. And that's kind of what we are going to do as far as a city, is making it safe for everyone, especially within that framework. And then I also just wanted to highlight why this is an important corridor overall. It's a 2-mile stretch that's going to connect Clifton Park to the Inner Harbor, a lot of the other neighborhoods in between. So we are, considering a lot of different people and neighborhoods and how people travel. There are a lot of great amenities, whether it's hospitals, schools, parks, grocery stores, healthcare. You name it, we have it all within this corridor. And so we're trying to make it safe as far as, calming that traffic, providing safe bikeways for people to travel. And again, really improving those pedestrian crossings where we see a lot of conflicts. And I think I kind of mentioned that as far as our goals. I think you guys are kind of seeing where the city is going, right? As far as what we need to do to make it safe for people on our roadways. I think when you think of complete streets, you often don't think, oh, we're making it safer for people to cross the street, or we're making it safe for people to bike or drive. I think when we think of complete streets, we're thinking, well, what is an incomplete street, right? And oftentimes when we see on our roadways, we feel uncomfortable. And a lot of that is within safety issues. We feel like people are driving too fast. We see a lot of crashes. We feel like it's unsafe for us to cross the street. So we know what that feeling of like an incomplete street is. Our goals are to really emphasize that, do the opposite of that, right? As far as making it safer for everyone. With that, we kind of have our preferred proposal as far as where our bike facility will go. We have additional kind of pedestrian and safety improvements through the corridor of both Wolfe and Washington. And what we're going to do is kind of show you our first kind of plans, and then take this further to a full 30% design is our goal to finish with this project. But we're still exploring these design options, and we're excited to hear from you today. So thank you very much.
All right. So we thought we'd take a moment just to bring everybody up to speed if they weren't at our first and second meetings. And that theme of the street being a place for the people really is carrying through this process. We know that our street isn't just a place for bikes, and that's not what we want to do. We want to look at all of the challenges that you brought to us and everything that you love about this place and think about this as all of the elements of the street, everything holistically. So if you guys are saying that we need to calm traffic and slow speeds, then that's what we want to accomplish with all the design tools that we have. So when we began this process, that's what we asked you guys. What do you love about this place? What can we preserve about Wolfe and Washington streets? It's a pretty long corridor. It connects a lot of neighborhoods. There's a lot of different folks who live here. There's visitors, there's residents. So we really wanted to dive into that. And there's a lot of great restaurants and places where kids go to school and families and places to visit along this corridor. So we wanted to really start there. So we took all of those things that you loved and we really started to wrap that into, okay, now what are our elements of design? But knowing this is, Bikeway's project, we have to talk about that. So we wanted to ask what made you feel safe, because there was discussion about the challenges of feeling safe in a multimodal environment with people driving and biking and walking and using transit. So we looked at our bikeways and we really heard back from you all that protected, that separated facility is something that feels safe. So this is an example of one of the boards from our breakout rooms where people put stickers on and said, this is what we prefer. So the most stickers landed on our protected bike lane and our two-way. And so we also did a survey and we asked the same question. So kind of in summary, we had 86% of folks liked that protected feeling, just answered for protected bikeway, and 41% said the two-way. So we wanted to take that and make sure that we were providing that opportunity for safety within this project development process. So we went through in our second public meeting knowing that an exercise of fit, because we have design tools and we have two corridors. And so we wanted to see what would fit and do a bunch of scenarios. So we developed 21 different options for Wolfe and Washington. And if you were there, you'll kind of remember we went through them one by one to figure out, well, if this was on Wolfe, could this be on Washington? If this was on Washington, could this be on Wolfe? Do these things make sense together? Are we solving our challenges? Are we sticking with our core values? And so a couple of the things that we gathered was that having one travel lane seemed acceptable to the group when we broke out into breakout groups and looked at all the different types of cross sections, and that we really wanted to maintain parking. That was very important. And that there was still, again, in our second meeting, is support for that two-way separated cycle track or two-way bike lane within our street. So we took that. And we also talked a little bit about how we make design decisions. And so foremost in our process is safety. Also chatting with you all, parking was really important in how we would make decisions to move forward. And then making sure everything fit. We didn't want to have substandard facilities or things that were squeezed too much for any of our design elements, for our parking or for our bikeway or for our travel lanes. And we want to make sure that it's buildable. We can afford to build this, that it works in our environment, and that we don't detract from our neighborhood character, that we continue to celebrate that. So we also took a look at some trade-offs of the couple sections that we narrowed all the way down to. So after saying, can we put this on Wolfe and that on Washington? Nope. Can we put this on Washington and that on Wolfe? Nope. We narrowed it down from those 21 to these two potential cross sections that happen to be on Washington. And so we were taking a look at whether we were going to try to do the cycle track and then back in angled parking on one side or parallel parking. So what we did after we heard that is we went through a bunch of scenarios, designed it, looked at parking, looked at how people would go straight, turn left, turn right, looked at how people would access transit, which side of the street do they need to be on, looked at how people would park their cars and get to their homes. So we went through all of that, and where we've landed today on what we would like your feedback on so that we can continue the process is something that looks like this. And so what we have here, and this is map view, I'm also going to share a section view and kind of talk through what this is. But we felt like after all of that analysis, we were landing on the two-way separated facility, which you can see here on the upper side of our map, with some separation, which is a buffer, and then parallel parking on both sides of the street. So I'm going to walk through this in a couple different ways so that you can digest this. And I'm just showing one little section, but we're going to show a map soon that rolls through the entire corridor. So just as a reminder to us, and we keep bringing this forward as we're designing and evaluating things, is safety and parking are so important. Mobility for all of the modes, very important. Access to transit, we want to make sure that that is safe and still accessible. And then just your streetscape, your environment, what does that look like? What does it feel like? What is that character like? So those are the things we're keeping in mind as we're going through the design process. And again, we're getting to 30 in this process, so we really need your help today, just kind of getting some feedback on where we are. So, as you all know, the street today, Washington, looks like this. We have about, this changes a bit throughout the corridor, but about 8 foot of parallel parking on both sides of the roadway and 2 12-foot travel lanes. So through our exercise of fit, this is what we're looking at in cross-section, which is the same as I just showed you in that map view. So we still have our sidewalks. We're working within that curb to curb. We're not moving the curbs. We're not moving stormwater. We're using paint and flex posts probably and wheel stops. But we have 10 feet of two-way cycle track with our 3-foot buffer. And then we have our 8-foot parallel parking, an 11-foot travel lane, and then 8-foot parallel parking. So maintaining that parallel parking as it is today on both sides of the street. So just a little bit of statistics. I'm saying this in 12 different ways just so it kind of sinks in, because I know we've seen it 100 times, but this is the first time for you guys. So some people digest things well in plan view, some people digest it well in section, and some people need vocabulary and numbers. So on your screen, you'll see kind of what I just said. So we've got that 10-foot wide cycle track. So that's 2 ways. We've got that 3-foot buffer that will be striped, but will also have a vertical element in it. And we have that 1 northbound travel lane and preserving parallel parking on both sides. So the idea with this is that we've preserved that safe space for folks biking. We've organized where people walk, where people bike, where people park. And really that facility can be used by a bunch of folks. So, people obviously are going to bike in it. We know people use their skateboards in that space, and we see runners and walkers out there. So having that space and that vertical separation and the space between the parking and that place is really nice and safe. So there's a couple design considerations since we're only going to 30%. And we know that we need to chat with you folks and get your feedback. There's a few things that we already know that we have to think about, right? So we know that we need to think a little bit about our traffic signals and operations, because we now are on a one-way street with 2-way bicycle movement. So there's some things we need to talk about there. Do we need to put in additional pedestrian push buttons and signals so that our bikes can use that when they're going the opposite direction? Do we need to reevaluate the timing on our traffic signals where we have them, just to make sure everyone's flowing and that's all working well? Or do we need to add some bicycle signals to this facility? We don't know yet. We're still evaluating. It would be great to hear back from you guys on what you think, but that's definitely something we're going to have to consider in the next steps. So the other thing we just wanted to bring to the surface is that, Matt was talking about kind of, appropriate streets and complete streets and incomplete streets. And right now we have this very wide space where people feel really comfortable speeding. And so we're thinking about how many people are on that roadway in those two lanes going kind of fast. And when we did our traffic analysis and looked at the numbers, there's actually not a ton, right? So the average amount of traffic daily on those two roads, we have 2,300 north of Alisana and 5,000 north of Lafayette. And so when we look at that as engineers, and this is the nerd in me coming out, it's below that threshold where we need those two lanes. So we know we're kind of oversized already. So we feel really comfortable coming down to that one lane. And you all shared that with us in our second meeting too. So again, just kind of coming back to that map view, I walked everyone through this. We're going to walk through Washington, and we still have Wolfe to talk about as well. But we wanted to talk a little bit about the focus on the safety, parking, and transit in just a little bit more detail. So I've talked a little bit about that organization, right? So having a separate place for people to bike and to walk and to park and to move their cars is really important. I think organization provides clarity, and it's great for safety as well. Everyone knows where they're supposed to be. It helps with predictable movements. When we reduce from those two travel lanes to one, we're kind of pinching, which we know helps calm traffic. So that's great because that provides better safety for our pedestrians, our kids trying to cross the street, et cetera. So that's calming our traffic in the corridor, which is one of those core values you all had. The other thing that we're doing here is we're reducing the pedestrian crossing distances. So you have an opportunity to pop out and look, but you don't have to walk as far, which is fantastic. It's less time crossing in front of moving vehicles. And then the other thing you'll see when you're reviewing the map is that we're improving the sight distances. So if you're a pedestrian, what we've done is we've actually organized that parking with some striping so that you can actually, as a pedestrian, come out and look and see what's going on better than if we're parked all the way up to the intersection. We also, when we're in our car and we pull up and we need to make a movement, we have that, we call it a triangle, but we're able to see who's coming on the perpendicular road. So those are some improvements that happen when we stripe these things. So when it comes to parking, what we've done here is we've maintained that parallel parking on both sides of the street. We heard that was really important. We wanted to do that with you all. We also are maintaining all of the permit zone parking. We're maintaining anyone who has a permit for a dedicated handicap spot. All of that stays the same. The other benefit to the design with the cycle track on the left side is that our transit users won't be in conflict with that facility. So we're trying to be mindful of that circulation of folks getting on and off the bus. So we know you all will have some concerns, and we know parking is super important. So let's talk about that for just a second. So when we stripe the roadway, we end up pulling some striping in, which is actually where parking is supposed to start. So when we park all the way up to the intersection, we're really supposed to be pulled back about 20 feet. That's where you're supposed to start parking. So when we stripe it, if we're not, putting in as many cars as we can, we are going to have 90% of the parking that we have today. So it's not that we took any spots away. It's just that we're kind of taking away the ability to park all the way up to the intersection. But that's at a trade-off of having safer pedestrian movements and safer vehicular movements.
Well, so can I just jump in here for 1 second? I just kind of want to reiterate that and kind of describe it in a different way.
Go for it.
When we narrowed it down to two options, we were really trying to maximize as much parking, right? So we know that this is an important community issue, and we wanted to do our best to try to mitigate any kind of parking impacts. And what we saw with kind of that angle in, we couldn't, and just depending on how the roadway changed, we couldn't have that as a consistent type of treatment. And so that's why we still have basically mirroring what we have today just by reducing a travel lane. So I think we did a really good job of maintaining this 90% of the overall parking inventory. And what Melissa is talking about is a thing that we call daylighting. But I think if we kind of talk about it through that incomplete streets narrative, for folks that have ever pulled out of a street or an alley or a driveway, and you're next to a parked car and you cannot see any cars that are coming, and you kind of nudge your car out, and then now your car is out behind beyond that parked car, and you still don't see anything, and then all of a sudden someone is driving very fast, or now you are seeing someone and there's a really close call. I mean, I'm sure that there are folks on the call right now that have either seen or been involved in a crash or an accident in that very similar situation. And so it's very uncomfortable. It's very nerve wracking making that turn or pulling out when you can't see what's coming. And so that's where that 10% is coming from. It's really at those intersections and those driveways. And so it's just overall a big safety issue for us. It's a comfort level. And I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I think we've all probably experienced that in one way or another.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. So the other thing that we're thinking about is folks, ask us, when they park their car, how does this work? And it works the same as when we park our car now, because we kept that parallel parking. So when you park on the one side with the cycle track, we'll look both ways and be careful, and we'll just cross that, 13 feet to get to our curb. What we like about this design with pulling away one of those lanes of travel is that if you park on the opposite side of the street from where your home is, we are down to one lane of travel. So you don't have two cars coming towards you, you have one, which does feel a little safer. The one thing we do want to get some feedback from you guys, because you live here, you function here, you own businesses here, is the topic of loading zones. So when we talk about loading zones and we are down to one lane of travel, what we would like to do is figure out if it is appropriate, just according to what you all think, if we need to designate some temporary loading zones. So how that would work would be, let's say, and I know everyone has different working hours, so I apologize for kind of 9 to 5ing this a little bit. But when a lot of folks kind of leave to go to work in the morning and there's less necessity for us parking our cars near our homes, if that's how we travel, then we have a temporary loading zone where trucks can come in, use the parking space, and do their loading and unloading during that window of the day that we designate. And then that way they're not in the travel lane doing loading and unloading. So that's something, as we get to the map, we'd really like your feedback on, because we need to know from you all if that is necessary. So again, we've talked about this. Matt really kind of started with it, but that vehicular capacity, if anyone has qualms about that, of course, you'll let us know. But really, with the volume of cars we have on that roadway, we feel really comfortable going down to the one lane. And what happens if people are uncomfortable with that, or, think they can get somewhere faster, then they naturally will choose a different route, right? But with the volumes we have, we really do have plenty of room to go down to one to help calm traffic and make it safer. So we've talked a lot about Washington because that's where the cycle track is going to go. But let's talk about Wolfe, because it's very important to understand, as it was for you to communicate to us in our second meeting and our first meeting, that we really have some speeding issues there. And we really need to calm this down for our families and folks who visit. So the entire corridor of Wolfe Street, what we did was we went through and we did some traffic calming. And so traffic calming are those things where we want to kind of pinch the space down a little bit, slow the vehicles down, improve those sight lines that Matt was talking about. And so that's what you'll see on the Wolfe Street side. So no bike facility on the Wolfe Street side. This is the same for cars as it is today. We're just kind of pinching, narrowing, calming. So you probably have seen these devices throughout the city, but you've probably seen some of those low-cost bulb outs with the flex posts using paving markings, striping. There may be some additional signage. We want to add some of those Bike Baltimore wayfinding signs to both corridors so everyone knows how to circulate and where to go. And one of the things that we're exploring right now, but we're not sure how that's going to work yet, is potentially speed cushions or speed tables to help further calm. So that's under consideration. We're exploring it. We're not sure how that's going to go yet. So what some of those elements will look like, I'm sure you've seen the painted curb extensions around town. Maybe we do some of those artistic curb extensions. Those are popping up all over the city and they kind of brighten our neighborhoods and celebrate our culture. Those extensions also provide turn hardening. So having a harder or a more close to a 90-degree turning angle does help calm and slow traffic. And then eventually maybe we get into some permanent curb extension. So it really narrows that pedestrian crossing distance for us. So it's about time for me to stop talking so that you all can do some exploring. I am going to show you how to get to the comment map from our project website and how that operates. While I'm kind of clicking through that, Matt, go ahead and did I forget anything? Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to say, one, this is a great tool for you guys to provide feedback. So we're really excited to share it with you. This is going to be open for another month. Please, if you can't stick with us throughout the entire presentation, on your own time, go ahead and check it out. We're going to walk through it, kind of do like a high level walkthrough. Go ahead and kind of jump in where you have like your points of interest and feedback. And I just wanted to kind of reemphasize just like how important, your feedback is to this project, and that this is one great tool, one of many, for you to kind of really highlight a specific intersection or location. If you don't feel comfortable using the map, there are other ways to provide feedback, and we'll reiterate those at the end. But you can email us, you can call us, or you can use the comment form on the website if you don't feel comfortable using this tool.
All right. So I think you all kind of saw how I went to the project website, went to the Wolfe, Washington section, and then clicked on comment map on the upper part of the menu of the website. And so this works pretty much like Google Earth. That's kind of what it is. So you can use your mouse or your trackpad to click and drag the map up and down to go north, south, east, west. And then you can use your scroll wheel, or you can use the pinch on your pad to scroll in and out. And so the idea here is that you can kind of zoom in, and maybe you want to type your address in the upper left-hand corner and find where you live or your business. You can scroll through and pop open some of these layers that we have, so you can turn things on and off just by clicking through these layers over here. There's a bunch of cars that I made everyone put in this display, so if those are distracting to you, you can turn the cars on and off, but I find that it helps you see where parking is. So you can explore that. And then if you want to leave a comment, you can do that as well. So if I want to leave a comment, I have a green circle. If I want to leave a question for the project team, that'll help us highlight all of the things that we need to answer. You can simply, it helps you out here. It says click to add point. So you click to add your point, you can comment in here, and then you're good to go. Close it, and that dot will be there. So you should be able to also, and you're welcome to start commenting while we're talking and working our way through this, but you can see other people's comments as well. So you can go through and see what your neighbors are saying. So I think at this point, I'm just going to kind of slowly scroll down and show you how some of these design elements work out. I didn't reiterate this several times during, the design discussion, but of course, striping in those crosswalks is really critical for safety. So you'll see that within this section. You'll also see, stop bars. Those probably need to be restriped or installed. So you'll see those. And then anything you see that looks like this hatched out, everyone uses our roadways and knows, this is kind of that, don't go in here section. So you can scroll through here. You can see how we've got the bike lane. And right now we have, flex post, wheel stop, flex post, wheel stop. Is that the exact spacing? We're not sure yet. What type of flex post and wheel stop are we using? We're not sure yet. If you guys have opinions about those things, that would be great to share and comment on as you scroll through. But yeah, it just kind of shows you the parallel parking on both sides. We've put all of that in here. You can see how these little bump outs are here. So it helps with that hardening and that calming of traffic. And you're welcome to just scroll through here, leave the comments. Is there anything that you wanted to highlight, Matt, and or does anyone have a question and want to start raising hands so we can take questions and comments?
All right, I see Kurt and Jan already have a hand up, so that's great. Oh, maybe it's an and. I don't know. Okay, it is Jan. Okay. Before we get to you guys, we'll monitor the hands that are going up. I think that's one thing that I wanted to highlight is that this is now your time to kind of give some feedback and comments outside of the map. So yeah, let's get those hands up. Great, Eric. Thank you. While we're on this northern section, I did kind of want to highlight, again, we're trying to build out a continuous network across the city for safe ways to bike around, right? And this is connecting to another project along St. Lo Drive that is going to be resurfaced within this or early next year that would then connect back to Harford Road, where we have kind of the new Harford Road Bridge opening up. And we're trying to close those gaps to have a seamless connection through that entire corridor. And then as part of our overall kind of bike plan, a comprehensive bike plan. So we're tying into not just existing infrastructure, but then planning for the future with the things that are coming down the line. And this will be that extension from Clifton Park that will then connect us to the promenade and existing kind of walking and bikeways there. So there is a kind of larger vision here. And this is a really key component to make those types of connections.
All right.
So, yeah, how do you guys want to roll with this? I think I did see Kurt go first, so he's number one for me.
All right, go ahead, Kurt.
I sort of have a couple questions. I'm fine with Washington Street. My questions are more with Wolfe Street. It appears that there's still 2 travel lanes of traffic. Does the volume of cars on Wolfe Street warrant 2 lanes of traffic is the first part. And if it doesn't warrant that, could we explore angle parking on Wolfe Street, losing 1 travel lane? Then we would have a net gain of parking in, the community, and it definitely would be traffic calming. Right now, I don't see traffic calming on Wolfe with bump outs. I understand it makes it more challenging for the corner turning, and it reduces the pedestrian walkway a little bit, but the vehicles traveling Wolfe Street are not going to slow. I've lived in that community for 37 years, and it's something we've been talking about for decades. And I just don't see, with what's being proposed, traffic calming, truly. I do agree you're making it a little easier for pedestrians at the intersection, but I don't see calming.
Thanks, Kurt. Yeah, and again, and I just want to thank our team too. Another consideration was a main stakeholder for Hopkins and also emergency vehicle access at the hospital. So those were considerations for Wolfe, and especially that northern section. It was important to kind of maintain, that additional vehicular lane. It's something that we looked at, and again, we're just tying in the different types of treatments that we think can work best. And again, there's no perfect solution, and I think you have a great idea there. As far as that back-end angle parking, I think just the fit, it just wasn't quite right for us. But we're certainly open to exploring that going forward.
Thank you.
And then I think my order, I saw Eric and then Crystal, and then I'll rely on the team for the next couple.
I just had a really quick comment. I really like the discussion of loading zones within these larger projects. I was curious if these have been tried elsewhere in the city and if they've been effective. I know from biking elsewhere in the city that I will see particularly FedEx trucks, et cetera, double parked in a bike lane next to a loading zone rather than pull in. So I'm sort of curious, has this worked elsewhere? And if it has, I in general just really like the idea.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I mean, we see the same kind of situations, and that's, why we recommended it. What I'm more miffed about is like if there's a loading zone and then they pull and still double park. That's more my pet peeve. So, I mean, I think, we have those instances, and it's just making sure that, people are taking advantage of and actually utilizing the infrastructure that we're building rather than parking illegally. I'm going to call on Crystal.
Yes.
Hi, Crystal.
Yes. Hi. I just want to thank you guys for all your work you've been doing on this. I live near Washington and Baltimore Street, and me and my family and my son, we commute up to Monument Street bike lane and over to U Baltimore, and we really desperately need that connection in a protected bike lane on Washington. So we just really want to appreciate what you're doing, and thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. I have Paul and then Carter.
Host is like. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, in one of the visuals that you showed us, you showed a green light or a stoplight for bicycles, and I don't think those are going in based on what I heard. But is there any chance of doing like a delayed green for the vehicular traffic so that pedestrians can get a head start walking through the crosswalk? And sometimes that's even timed for bicycles the same way, because, you know, as you talked about, when you're sitting in a car, you don't realize how vulnerable the other road users are. So you just kind of stomp on the gas and you go, and pedestrians do get hit that way. So is there any chance that some of that is being considered? And then as regards flex posts, after a flex post has been replaced 3 or 4 or sometimes even 10 times, is there any consideration given to putting a stiff post in, or whatever you call them, something that doesn't flex? Because there are drivers who just kind of ignore them. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Matt, do you want me to take that one, or do you?
I didn't quite catch the first part. I think for the flex post, yeah, we definitely explore that. And you can see we have a combination here of curb stops and flex posts. And as you said, you know, kind of maintaining some things. We've experimented with some new materials on the Hartford Road Bridge project, and we may be expanding that. So yeah, definitely hear your concern on the kind of maintenance piece and safety as far as kind of maintaining that separation. And then Melissa, what was the first part?
Yeah, he was talking about leading pedestrian intervals, right. And I can cover that, or you can.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I think yes. I think the short answer is yes. So.
Yes. I think once we get the feedback on this design, we definitely need to take a look at all of the signal timing. There might be intersections that warrant signals that don't have them now. And for sure, I'm a big proponent of the leading pedestrian interval, giving the peds the opportunity to move before the vehicles do. So that is something we'll take a look at. And that will be whether or not we add a bike signal or the bicyclists are asked to use the pedestrian signal for their movement. So yeah, we've got a great traffic team, and that'll be part of the next steps of this project.
Thank you.
Exactly. And I would just say, you know, we're taking this particular phase of the project into 30% design. To get it to 100% design, we'll go through a lot of that kind of engineering to have a final project ready to go to be built. So there's still a lot of opportunities for that type of input and considerations.
Thanks, Paul. All right, up next is Carter.
Hello, thank you. Actually, Paul took the question out of my mouth. I was going to also ask about leading pedestrian intervals. Want to reiterate, thank you so much for the work that's being done. I was actually biking this route on Wolfe between Madison and Monument recently. And frequently when I travel this route, I get buzzed by cars going by. So very happy that this is being done and that it's being implemented as quickly as possible. And would like to reiterate the need for leading pedestrian intervals, not just here, but across the city. So thank you again.
Thanks, Carter. All right, next up, I believe, is Graham.
Graham, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Can unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. I think as soon as the host unmuted me, I muted myself in the exact same second. Okay. Just like everybody else is saying, I'm really excited to see this project happen. And I just kind of want to follow onto what Kurt said about if we're so comfortable with traffic volumes going down to from 2 lanes to 1 lane on both these corridors. I I know that delivery vehicles and whatever, we can come up with a lot of excuses of why we should keep 2 lanes. But I mean, going southbound on Wolfe from the Hopkins area down to Fells Point, I think Spirit's Tavern, I mean, it's not a joking matter. I think Spirit's Tavern has had a car basically hit their front door more than a couple times during the pandemic. That kind of thing just seems like that should be a bigger deal than delivery vehicles being inconvenienced or that kind of thing. And then one other kind of comment just on somebody who bikes this corridor pretty regularly. I'm a little bummed to hear that it's going to go in on Washington rather than Wolfe, just because in the area that I live, between Hopkins and Fells Point, going northbound on Washington there, you're going uphill. So as a cyclist, I can only go about 10 miles an hour uphill, but Wolfe Street, I feel a lot more comfortable because I just dominate my lane and go 25 miles an hour downhill and kind of run with the bulls and go with the cars there. So I don't know, was there any logic as to why we're doing this on Wolfe and not Washington? Sorry, I switched those up. Why we're doing it on Washington instead of Wolfe?
Yeah, there is, and we could share with you the process of elimination we went through, where if we have this on this side, then this doesn't work, and this has to work, and so I'm not sure if you were in our second meeting, but if not, I believe that's recorded, or we could get you that packet so you can see how we went through that process of elimination of coming to the conclusion that Washington, the space worked the best. And I think part of that, if I could summarize it, is if we did one on Wolfe and one on Washington, then there's a ton of space on Washington that is left over. What do we do with that to really, really calm traffic? Especially when we're working within the existing curb and we want to work with striping to keep this as economic as possible. And when we put something that was two-way on Wolfe, it was just so tight and we couldn't fit parking and vehicular movement and bike movement. And then there were some transit trade-offs. So happy to share that with you if you want to see it, so you can kind of go through that process of elimination with us.
Yeah, and those resources, as Melissa said, are on the webpage. We have those presentations up. Regardless, you're going to have to, go uphill at some point. And so we wanted to make sure that we accommodated both the north and south directions. If you're comfortable going down Wolfe, that's wonderful. Not everyone is kind of riding with shared traffic. And now you have an option.
All right. So I think we are on to Chris.
Hello, thank you. Just wanted to say these are really great, ideas, and I think the protected two-way bike track is critical, a critical connector to the water. So, you're obviously getting a lot of support at this meetings. I'm sure you'll get pushback and opposition in other venues and other places. So, wanted to lodge my, definite full support for the protected bike track. And it was a good point, as said before, about the loading zone area. I think that's a pretty good idea. I would really encourage you to think about creative and bright or obvious signage, because as was noted, it's not that, so there's loading zones that they just don't park in, and they park in bike tracks or other places. So, whether it's, enforcement of the rules, or just, if they say they don't see the loading zones, maybe making them super duper obvious, or I don't know how you notify Amazon drivers or who that there are these loading zones now when before there weren't, so that hopefully they would use them. I don't know. I think that's a pretty good idea. There's only one lane. Amazon drivers and others do, or people, moving their cars, whatever. Moving things in their houses, or tend to take up space. So anyway, all great idea. Definitely support traffic calming efforts on both streets. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And I have Mallory up next.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I apologize if my question's been addressed already, and feel free to say so. I signed in a little late today. I live on Washington Street at Pratt, and haven't heard anyone mention about ambulance traffic going up. It's like a main corridor up to Hopkins. I see lots and lots of ambulances, and let me know if I'm wrong about this, but it seems like one single lane with two parallel parkings isn't really enough for everyone to scoot over for that. Would you disagree?
Matt, or do you want to talk about our work with Hopkins?
Yeah, no, this was definitely this is a preferred alignment for Hopkins and their needs as far as operations and emergency vehicle access.
Okay,
and
great.
so we've definitely talked it through with them. And again, it does kind of depend on block to block as far as kind of space. And so, you bring up a good point, but we always kind of vet everything through kind of our stakeholders, my fire department, emergency vehicle access, et cetera. So we work with our partners closely on making sure that it suits their needs. And this is not an uncommon kind of alignment. But again, recognize your concern.
All right. And I have Sam next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much. Really excited about this. This is the first meeting I've been able to attend. I am a resident in Hamilton, and I commute down through St. Lo onto Wolfe every day to my office in East Baltimore. So this is very, very exciting for me. One thing I wanted to say, I really appreciate the left-sided design and not having to interfere with transit, since that's often can be a tough interaction. And I had a question about, and this may be outside the scope of what you're doing at this moment, but how this interacts with that connection to St. Lo, because that coming up north on Washington as it goes into the park is actually probably the diciest part for me as a cyclist, as it kind of goes from two into one lane and then no one really knows where they're going. So I was just curious about that connection and how that will play out.
Thank you, Sam. Nice to hear from you. And yes, that's a different project completely. But it will be a seamless connection. And that's something that I just want to make very clear, is that we want to tie these things in. And so that whole section will be repaved, and we will be realigning the roadway to accommodate, both people walking and biking, and doing some traffic calming, as well as some of the similar intersection treatments for people walking in that corridor. So it will also kind of have those traffic calming benefits, eliminating that kind of bobbing and weaving within the wider roadway, and really emphasizing those intersections and crossings for people that are out just walking through the park. And again, as you noted, biking, making sure that that's a seamless connection. And to be transparent, I have a 2:00 conflict. We are scheduled to go through 2:30. I'm going to jump off this call, but I have our team who's taking notes, who's listening, and appreciate all the comments. I apologize for not being able to stay through to the entire time, but I look forward to hearing from you. Please utilize the map going forward, and look forward to all the feedback. Thank you, guys, and I will talk to you all later. Melissa, the show is all yours.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Okay. I have John up next.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. So I just have a quick sort of really broad question, which is hopefully not too broad for this meeting that's kind of about a specific project. But can you tell me about sort of like the ideal timetable for this project and ways that maybe this process could be made a little more rapid? Because as someone who supports projects like these, it's a little exhausting to be asked to like lodge opinions about every single corridor I might use in my work or commute or personal life. And, I'm not a professional traffic engineer. I just know these plans date back to 2015. And that's when my niece was born in Mid-Govins. And it's very difficult for me to visit my niece. And she went from being a newborn to, second year of grade school, and still nothing's happened.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It's one we get a lot. The project development process is different for every project we do, whether it's a roadway project or a plaza or anything else. So I think for these projects, it's kind of resource based, right? So we have so many resources meaning staff, so many resources meaning money. And we have to go through a process by which, particularly if we have state or federal money, that we have so many touch points with the community. So we need to schedule those in. And so what happens with some of our projects is we need a little bit more time to talk to the various stakeholders to make sure that everyone is comfortable and we come to consensus. And so that sometimes extends the project timeline. And then sometimes we have a project we would like to do and we submit for funding, but we don't get it. So we have to wait an entire year and then submit for funding again to see if we are granted that funding. So it's a little bit of a chess game of trying to get through the project development process, make sure we talk to all of our stakeholders, make sure we're going after the right funding, and then getting it to the next stages. So you're right, and that can be frustrating. We try to streamline the engineering part as much as we can because sometimes that's the fast part. We can draw really quickly, but we want to make sure that if we have 25 stakeholders, we meet with all of them. And if they have concerns, that we address those. And sometimes we are just kind of at the mercy of our funding source. So it is a great question. And a lot of projects have to go through planning and then feasibility and concept design and then final design, because that's how we get our funding. That's how it comes in. So it's a really great question. The other thing that you can do to help advance this is probably call your council people and see if they can help the process along, because they're involved in some of those budgetary conversations. So use your resources with your council people, and your support of this project does help advance it faster, because those are some of the things we need to get to the next stage of asking for funding or advancing the project or helping spread the word about what we're doing. So thank you for asking. Okay, I have Sanja.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, how are
Hello,
you?
everyone. Good, thank you. I just wanted to say I think it's a lovely initiative, pointing to and underpinning or helping towards lessening global warming, encouraging mobility. I'm a nurse, so of course I'm always going to want to see that people get out, exercise, and move a lot better, and thus hopefully an outcome of improved health within our inner city here. However, I want to add my name, and I think it was a gentleman with the first name Paul who indicated that he would like to perhaps see a more rigid protective barrier. That might be the one thing that popped in for me, and I appreciate Matt's addressing the ambulance, Matthew, earlier, who was on the call. He addressed the assuring that the ambulance or the emergency vehicles that move around, especially in our footprint for the hospitals, that they won't be impeded. So I'm glad that you're taking a close look at that and making sure that stakeholders are involved in that convo. But the other part is that rigid protective barrier. I'd like to add my voice to that ask, because I'd like to think that anybody walking, cycling on a scooter has as much protection as they can. Sometimes people don't mean to err and hit someone, but once you're hit, you are hit. So I'd like to add my name to that. But I think it's a fabulous initiative, and thank you for doing it.
All right, noted on the rigid protection. Thank you. Okay, I think next up is Joshua.
Hi. Yes. First, I just want to say thank you all for doing this. I fully support anything that makes Baltimore more bikeable. I live in the large apartment complex at Fayette and Wolfe, and I've noticed that two questions. There's a school next door on Fayette and Washington that traffic gets quite heavy on Washington. That makes it tough to drive out of our apartment complex's only garage exit. And so I was wondering if y'all had any issues to address that. And then second, is more about, are there any traffic calming plans for traffic going east-west on Orleans or Fayette? Because I've looked out of my window before and I've seen cars on Orleans and Washington that have been flipped over and like people drive kind of like crazy on there. So
Same, yes. So I don't know the answer to the Orleans question as well as Matt probably does with things that are going on in the city. So if you want, Joshua, I can have him get back to you on that. And I'm trying to remember what the first thing was that you asked.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The first thing was the school on
the school
Fayette in Washington.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm glad you brought that up. I am not entirely sure if Matt has had a chat with the school about their circulation and what goes on there, but that's absolutely why we need to have meetings like this to remind us of things like that. So as we were going down our stakeholder, go ahead, Trina. You probably know.
I just want to just verify. I believe that's the Montessori school, correct?
I think you're right, Serena.
I'm pretty sure that's the Montessori school. And while my mic is open, I will just share that we are working on some improvements on Orleans Street, from Patterson Park down, I believe, to Washington. So there is some conversation being had in the background about safety improvements along the corridor.
Thank you, Crystal. I saw your chat. So Joshua, does that answer your question, or shall I have Matt get back to you on anything?
That answers it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have AC up next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm also a resident of Washington Street, and happy to see the bike lane. However, a couple concerns. The first one is we've talked about emergency vehicles, but I feel like just telling us there's a plan is not sufficient. Like I need to know how an emergency vehicle is going to get to my house if there's only one flow of traffic. So. Concern there. The other big concern that I feel like we don't have very good representation is we have no back entryway to our homes. The only way we can load and unload anything, and when I say anything, as simple as groceries, is through Washington Street. So I'm not seeing any room to be able to accommodate that. So, there's not a lot of assistance for people to be able to get things in and outside of their homes.
So help me understand.
With the two ways now, people will pull up, put on their flashers, and load and unload. So, like if you're going on a trip out of town and you have to load luggage, that's an example. I mean, there's just people are constantly loading and unloading because we don't have any way to get into our houses other than the front.
I see what you're saying, not the parking space, but if the street is parked up.
Oh, yeah, because, you can't find parking. So if you have to load and unload, the only way you can do that is to stop on the street.
Mm-hmm. That is a really good comment, and we should think about that.
Yeah, I can already envision it being a nightmare because people are going to just block traffic because if someone's got to get something in and out of their house, I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah. So one thing is because we've kind of pulled back and striped the ends, hopefully you could pull into an end spot and at least you're on your block. So I don't know exactly where your block is, but we could take a look at the design and see if that's available to you. I know that's not as comforting if you're carrying a giant piece of furniture, but maybe, helps with the grocery, which is more frequent. But yes, that is a legitimate concern. And thank you for sharing. And I'm going to put that on our list. Okay, I have Ramona up next.
Hello, I'm Ramona, and I live on Wolfe Street near Baltimore Street. And we have when the city started again, we have the street sweeping going on. And these particular areas do get quite trashy. And I noticed that if you're going to take up and put either flexible or inflexible barriers between the cars and the bicycles, how is the city going to do its sweeping? Has the city decided they would come and use other apparatus to clean?
I'll take that one, Melissa. This has been a major concern for me as chief of engagement for DOT. I hear it all over the city. And as a result, we're now meeting in the background with Public Works and some other agencies to determine what equipment will need to be procured so that we can continue to do this work, but have the right equipment on the street to be able to take care of the maintenance and cleanliness. So that this project is in the design phase, and before it is constructed, we will have a plan for maintenance. So as we continue to meet about this, those answers will be available because we're working on coming up with a plan for them now.
Thanks, Serena. Thanks, Ramona. Okay, I have Crystal is up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I just wanted to point out, Joshua had mentioned the school at Fayette and Washington. So
Yes.
that's Commodore John Rogers School, and they are slated to do a major building change, site change and renovation. So they're currently considering 3 different options, 2 of which the loading and unloading would happen on Fairmount Ave, 1 of which the loading and unloading would happen on Washington Street. They have not pinned down, I don't think, which one of those they're doing yet. So I think that your planning and their planning may behoove each other to contact just to see what's going on there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tarina, perhaps we can set up another meeting there. Okay. Thanks, Crystal.
I'm taking notes as well. Thank you. I was unaware of that reconstruction.
All right. Thanks again, Crystal. And I have Kurt next.
Actually, I had taken my hand down. I was just going to mention, that it was Commodore John Rogers, not the other school.
Thank you. All right. And Jed, you are up.
Hey, thanks, Melissa. I was just going to encourage you all to look at, the traffic volumes and see if you can drop any of these left-hand turn lanes in some of the really high volume intersections to try to do some protected intersection crossings. I think particularly at Monument, I know this is just like a rough drawing, but at Monument, that would be extra important to connect to the protected bike lane there. And I wanted to echo some comments about Wolfe Street. I'm also pretty concerned about people still speeding down Wolfe. And I think if this traffic calming is like a precursor to two-waying that street or something, that's awesome. And, maybe that's worth considering. But if it's not, then I think, if that's not in the plans, then I think, looking toward the reverse angle parking or anything else to reduce the, travel volumes there down to 1 lane would be important. And then I heard a couple people mention sort of the parking and sweeping sort of fears. And as someone that has an office on Maryland Avenue that, went from 4 lanes peak hour and then 2 lanes off peak to this exact configuration, I think what you tend to see is, people are fine to double park and block like a second lane of traffic. But when you go down to 1 lane like this, 90% of people aren't going to block the entire street permanently while they're unloading. There's like a lot of societal pressure not to do that. So you see that sort of double parking drop a lot. At least anecdotally, that's what we've seen, on the street that I live along and the street that I work along. And then the sweepers, these 2-lane roads, even our standards, 2-lane protected bike lanes, the 2-way ones, even our standard street sweepers can actually fit in those, as can the city's contract plows. So they don't necessarily even need special equipment for this type of design. They really only need it for the even narrower 1-way cycle tracks.
Thanks, Jed. Appreciate that. All right. And thanks for the note on the left turns. We'll take a look at those. You're right. Just trying to fit it in for concept, but we'll definitely be making those tweaks. Any other of those comments that you guys want to add to this map would be fantastic. I appreciate that. Okay, let's see. I glanced through the chat and thank you for the notes on the school that you all were making and on some of the things that are a little bit tricky Appreciate the comments on Wolfe, and we will take a look at that for some additional parking or traffic calming, just to verify based on your comments today. And I don't see any other hands up. Okay, Chris, you're up.
Thanks everyone for this project. It looks like a great concept so far. Have there been any thoughts to curb extensions for the bus stops?
Yes, we did take a look at that. I think, we'll probably take another quick peek at that and where the bus stops are and curb extensions. I'm not sure we've come to resolution on that and how that would work and spacing. This is also for right now, we're kind of pushing this through as signing and striping project. And so we haven't talked about any of that hardening of infrastructure. And when we get into that conversation, we kind of start into the stormwater conversation and do we have stormwater inlets? So it's a little bit more complicated, but what I will do is take that down, take a look at that. Perhaps there are some that we could put in those temporaries like we have elsewhere in the city. And then we can look at that for if we're going for further investment, maybe hardening some of those too. So I haven't looked at that very deeply just because we were trying to be signing and striping for this, but I can take a look at that before we finish our 30%.
Sure, I appreciate that. And I think I'd probably rather have it built sooner rather than wait for funding for a larger investment just to have those curb extensions. But they would be nice, kind of like what's been done on Baltimore Street with the drainage is still there. You still have that channel, but with additional sidewalk space.
Yes, definitely. We'll take a look at it. Thank you for mentioning. Okay. And Lizzie in the chat asked me if I could reiterate the timeline on this. If we can get to all of our stakeholders in a timely manner and make sure that we're feeling good about this, we'd like to button up this design, I would say, in the next few months. When I say design, that's 30%. After that, I think it's about that funding again and when that goes through and if we're going after a grant and how that works into Matt and the city's overall budget. So I can't answer that question, but I can ask Matt to answer that timeline question on the website. All right, and I see Emily has a hand up.
Just thinking earlier about the question from the resident on loading and unloading, and earlier in the session, the comments about business and delivery loading zones. I'm just wondering if the concept of a residential loading zone exists and could it be protected like a tow-away zone, and what would be the if you park there, like does someone come and tow you away? So could residents rely on it essentially?
Yes. So I think there are going to be some space where you could, for instance, kind of pop your car here if you need a quick grocery unload. I think technically double parking is illegal. So I can't provide that for everyone. It is a great question. I do think there's going to be some moments in here where you can do that. I know I lived in Canton for a while and it is very tight and I absolutely appreciate that. So I think it's something that we can think about. I don't know if I have a perfect answer for you right now, other than I do think there's going to be some brief striped spaces where you can pull off and load and unload. And I've never really heard of residential loading and unloading spaces. So if you have heard about it, send me a link. But I don't think that's something I've heard of. All right. Thank you, Emily. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up here?